So today we're going to go ahead and talk about building a bag, a survival bag, an emergency kit, a go bag. There's all these different names for it. Basically, the concept is you're in an emergency situation and you want to have some key items to grab and go. Now, maybe you'll do like I do and just leave it in your trunk. And so it could also be a get home bag if needed, or just a contingency bag, right? Maybe you're out at a sporting event and it's cold, and so you go in your bag and you grab a beanie or something like that. But before I get into that, what I want to do is I want to talk about, we're going to go through all these 15 items, gear, but you want to keep in mind there's no bag that's going to fit everybody's needs. And also it's unreasonable to just go out and spend $500,000, whatever, on getting everything that you might ever possibly need, especially if you don't even know how to use those things. So the most important item that you can carry with you is knowledge. And so that's why on the in the black, I've got some skills written down. Now, to me, these are 12 really key skills that everybody should learn. There's lots of other things too, right? How does money work, and blah blah blah. There's a million different things that are ideal for people to know. But I find roughly in order for your average person, these are the important items. Now, obviously you can't learn all 12 of those at once, so where should you start? Well, I would start with first aid, fire, purifying water, and knot tying. Those are all relatively easy to learn. Now, first aid, I mean, that obviously could go from putting on a Band-Aid to becoming a medical doctor. There's a whole, right? It depends on how deep you want to go. But for main things, first aid is not that hard to learn. Fire, not only how to start a fire, right, but also how to stop a fire. In your house, do you have a fire extinguisher? Do you have maybe a fire blanket? I always keep a fire blanket personally in my kitchen so that, if something were to happen on the stove, sure, I've got that extinguisher there as well, but man, you spray that and it's just going to make a huge mess. Whereas the blanket, you pull it out, cover the fire, done, right? But we're going to talk more. We're going to talk about these different skills in later videos. Purifying water, there's a whole lot of different areas on that, depending on how hard you want to make it. Knot tying, there's a million different knots. Really 5, maybe 10 knots will be all that you'll ever need. So again, we'll have future videos where we'll go through each of those. Now, I'm saying those are the ones to start with, but I don't put other things that are higher on my list that I'll talk about, right? And that's because, like self-defense, I'm not going to sit here and teach you self-defense, how to shoot guns or how to become a karate expert or whatever the case may be. That's up to you as far as what you want to learn. And I mean, at the very least, situational awareness. Don't walk down a dark alley in a huge city at 2 o'clock in the morning with AirPods in so that you can't hear anything. That's not a good idea, right? And then there's some things like blade sharpening where, although yes, it's useful for keeping your, certain knives or whatever sharp, maybe in your emergency bag, but the biggest thing there is really in the kitchen, right? So you have all these different knives and you want to prepare food, and so periodically sharpening them is going to make your life a lot better. So those are the first 4 things I would suggest everybody learn: first aid, fire, both starting and stopping, purifying water, knot tying. We'll talk more about those in later videos. Now, as far as gear, there's a lot of stuff here, right? 15 items, and in fact, most of these are not items. Most of them are categories, and so each category may have several different items. Now, where should you start, right? Well, what I've got laid out here are some different ideas of things. This is not all inclusive, and I'm not saying that you get all of this stuff, right? Kind of the big thing is, as you learn more and more skills, then you can add or subtract, right, from your bag. If you live in Florida, like I do, where it doesn't really get super cold, then you don't have to really worry about things the same way as if you live in Minnesota and you might get stuck out in a blizzard or something like that. So again, you have to take these things into account. Now, so we're going to go through these really quick and just give you guys ideas on things you might want. Now, there's also in the description for this video, I've put a link to an Amazon site that, you know, it's like a wish list basically, where a lot of these different items are. It's not an affiliate link. I don't make any money off of it. I just thought that would be an easier thing to, you know, if you really have no idea where to start, maybe you can grab, you know, a couple things here and there. It just makes it kind of simple for you, right? Because obviously the easiest thing to do is you just go onto a site, you get a pre-made, you know, emergency bag and call it a day. Oh, I'm ready to go. And the reality is most of those bags are just junk. I mean, the bags themselves are probably not very good. They don't have what you need. They're not tailored for your environment. The things that are in there are just super low quality. Uh, that's the number one rule I would say, is do not get a pre-made bag. It's just not going to work out for you, right? So now, if we start down the list, so water, right? You can carry some water with you. You know, this of course depends on how many people there are and how many days you're going to be gone. It just can get into gallons and gallons. It's very unrealistic, to be honest with you, to carry that. What I would suggest is putting like maybe a liter bottle of water in there, so in your bag, so you have it ready, and then getting something like a Sawyer squeeze where you can just attach that to it, and then as you can use non-potable water, right, from like this pond back here, for example, and you can use that in conjunction with, say, a Sawyer squeeze. There's lots of other things. I would definitely choose this over a life straw, by the way. So that gives you some options. It's like about $30 roughly. Another option is you can get these portable aqua tabs. And so there's two things here. One of them is just to sanitize the water, to purify it. Basically, you put a tablet in water, and 30 minutes later, it's ready to drink. But it's going to taste really nasty. And so that's what the second bottle is for, is to try to take away kind of the nasty taste. This, I don't remember, it's like $10 maybe, something like that. So maybe that's, you know, a really cheap way to go. Personally, this, like Grails, this is like the easiest thing, and it's super, super useful, because whereas the Sawyer Mini will take out like bacteria and things like that, the Grail will also take out viruses and a lot of other things. Like this will do more for your water than, you know, in a lot of cases, than boiling, because there's some man-made contaminants, chemicals that are in the water that boiling it wouldn't impact, but this will. But this is like, you know, $90, $100, something like that. So, you know, if you're just starting out, I would not get this. I love this. I take it with me on vacations and everything else, but that's maybe down the road. Starting out, do something, you know, a little bit cheaper. Now, first aid, number 2 on the list. Here's the first aid kit that I carry in my backpack, whenever in my travel backpack. This is the first aid bag that I carry in my car as part of my emergency kit. Obviously, look at the size of these. This has a lot more than this does. Again, I mean, if you're going to get a pre-made first aid kit, to get a decent one, it's going to be about $150, $200, something like that. And you're probably not going to know how to use a lot of the things that are in there. So I wouldn't go that route. What I would do is get some kind of bag, right? Like this one, or this one's probably bigger than most people would want. You get some kind of bag to carry things in, right? So you can get that $10, $15, whatever. And then this is a great kit, this Johnson & Johnson kit. This is not, you don't want to get this and throw it into your bag, because this is going to have, you know, 1,000 Band-Aids and all this other stuff that you just don't need, right? So you get this kit, you take out some really useful stuff from it, like the gauze and the Neosporin and, you know, the Benadryl for, like, you know, itching and stuff like that, and then a whole bunch of Band-Aids. So this can form kind of the core, you know, boo-boo section of your kit. And then you should get a couple of other items. None of them are super expensive, but they're all really helpful. And the main thing for those are to help stop the bleed. So, for example, these trauma shears, these are like $4. Okay. Now you can get really nice ones. Like if I'm an EMT and I'm using them every day, I'm not going to get the $4 ones. I'm going to get the, you know, $100 Leatherman Raptors or something like that. But, you know, it's having an emergency, you know, 1-time use, 2-time use, something like that. These are great. And so what this is good for is if somebody's got a really bad wound on, you know, like right here is not bad. You can pull this up, right? But let's say I've got a really bad wound and I've got jeans on and you just can't get to it. If it's a really bad wound, seconds matter. And so rather than trying to have them take off their jeans or using a knife, which you're probably going to end up stabbing them and making things worse, then for $4, you cut away the clothes, and then you can actually see what you're working with. Now, another thing, a couple other things that I would add to the boo-boo kit, we'll go ahead and get them out of here. Number one is I would add a tourniquet, okay? So a cat tourniquet. And again, we'll have later videos where I go through a lot of first aid things, and we'll talk about how to use these items and so forth. Ideally, don't blindly throw anything into your bag. Tourniquets are not hard to use, but if you really have no idea what you're doing, it's not going to be a helpful situation. Like, you may not get it tight enough, or you may put it on and like leave it on for days, which is not going to be a good thing. So there's a few things to know. Another really helpful item. This is what's called an Israeli bandage. So it's compression bandage, so it can really help stop bleeding. I would get at least those things, right? So trauma shears, Israeli bandage, and a tourniquet. So these are more for like really stopping major bleed. When I say learn first aid, CPR and stopping major bleed are the two biggest things that you should focus on. Also get some gauze, and then also carry throw some medications in there, right? So you should have, what I try to do is keep like a week's worth of my prescription meds, mine, my wife's, my dog's, and so forth in the bag. Also things like Pepto-Bismol or Pepcid, like if you're having heartburn. Pepto-Bismol is a great kind of all-round thing, but maybe like Imodium for anti-diarrheal, maybe some pain meds, like Tylenol, or maybe something for inflammation, Advil. There's a whole bunch of different things. I try to have a lot of the contingency stuff in mind, and I'm not suggesting you start with all of that, but those are good places to start. Okay, so that's first aid. Now, as far as fire goes, right, so number 3, fire. There's all kinds of things, ferro rods and primitive skills and everything else. I mean, to me, just really keep it simple. Get a Bic lighter. So when I didn't know much, I used to think, oh, I can't get my Bic lighter wet because then it'll destroy it. And that's not the case at all. I could throw this Bic lighter in that pool right there, and then within 30 seconds have it working again. So, but it's just a habit that I've had, and it's not a bad idea to just have spare baggies with you, because you can always use baggies for stuff, organization, water, whatever. So some of the things that I do, and I'll talk more about this later with lighters, is number 1, I remove the child safety. So that's going to, A, if it gets wet, makes it easier to dry out. B, it makes it a lot easier to start. Now this one, you see that it's not going to be able to start, right? And that's because some people will use zip ties around here. I'm not using a zip tie, but what I'm using is a bank line with an arbor knot tied. And so you put that underneath the gas thing, and see, now it can light, right? And so this is just one of these things. It's like, oh, I've got some bank line around here, so let me just go ahead and tie some bank line in here around it and get that going. And so it works out really well. I also put Gorilla Tape, wrap Gorilla Tape around it, so that you've got an extra foot or two of Gorilla Tape if you need. Now, one other thing that you may want to carry with you, it all depends on creating fire. It's really easy to do. What you can do is get some Vaseline and cotton balls, smear the Vaseline all over the cotton balls, get a regular drinking straw, cut it in maybe like 1.5 inch lengths, put the Vaseline infused cotton balls in there, light the end, clamp it with some pliers, light the other end, clamp with some pliers. That way it's not going to be a mess, and it's just gonna, and it's a really great, easy fire starter. So if you did need to get a fire going, then that's just an easy thing to do, and it costs nothing, and it just takes no time at all. One other thing I would say is, I think it's really, really useful, these little baggies, and I don't know if you saw them in the first aid kits, but you can get these little baggies. They're like $5 for, like, I don't know, hundreds of them, and you can, it's always a good idea. This is good for like medications. Obviously, I use it for more than just medications, but it's good to keep medications in here. It takes up a lot less space than having like a bottle of Tylenol or something like that. And then you can also write down what it is, directions, like how often you should take it, what it's for. but then also what is the date? So then you can easily go through and know if your medications are expired. So the next category, shelter, number 4. This is really the hardest thing to spec out for somebody because everybody's needs are different. You know, summer, winter, live in the north, live in the south, whatever the case may be. So some common things are just have an emergency Mylar blanket, or an emergency thermal blanket. These cost like a dollar or two. They cost nothing. They're kind of meant for like one-time use, but if you're really needing to stay warm, there's no excuse to not have a couple of these in there. I mean, it's good for first aid. Somebody's going into shock, they need to stay warm. These are good. You're caught out in the cold, right? I mean, there's a lot of uses for this, and it takes up no room, costs hardly anything, pretty useful. One thing that I always like to have is some kind of rain gear. So in my travel backpack, I have it's like half this size, a raincoat. This is a poncho and a tarp. So the poncho drapes it over you. You can, if you're carrying your backpack, you can carry it over that. But then also, if you do have any idea of what you're doing, and you've got some basic cordage or things like that, you can use it as a tarp, as a shelter as well. So it's a multi-purpose item. It's fairly light. I want to say this is like $20, something like that. But to each their own. I personally have a lot more shelter items in my kit, but again, I'm not trying to have everybody go out and spend a whole bunch of money and know how to fly tarps and everything else, right? So we're just trying to keep it simple. So, but some kind of rain gear, ponchos, even those little cheap little $3 throwaway ponchos, something for rain, maybe something for your head. I think it's a good idea to have shoes and socks with you. So for example, I pretty much only use flip-flops. But if I'm having to walk, my car is broken down or something, I've got to walk 10 miles, I don't want to do that in flip-flops. So I keep tennis shoes with socks in the back of my car. A lot of times people will go to work, especially women wearing high heels and stuff like that. You don't want to be dealing with high heels when you're, trying to walk miles and miles. So keep a pair of reasonable shoes, hiking shoes, tennis shoes, something like that in your car. One more thing I would say is trash bags, especially yard bags. These can be used for a lot of different things. You can cut holes in them and you can make them into makeshift ponchos, and there's a whole lot. I'm not going to get into all the different things you can use these for, but there's a lot that you can do with this. And at the end of the day, if nothing else, for trash, because I mean, if it's you and your family for 3 days, you may want to have somewhere to put your trash. So the next thing is tools. Now, for tools, in the last video, I talked about some things that I would definitely always have with me. Tools could be something like a multi-tool, highly recommend. It could be something like a fixed blade knife, highly recommend. Maybe when you're starting off, you have a little Swiss Army knife you've had for 10 years. It's in a kitchen drawer or something somewhere. Put that in your kit just right away, so that you've got at least something to cut with, right? I personally think that having some paracord is also a really good idea. I personally have paracord and bank line, but I mean, at least some paracord. For emergency situations, I would go with bright paracord, because typically you're going to want to be found, or you could use this for marking or whatever. So those are useful things. Some Gorilla Tape is also good. Now, what I do is I have Gorilla Tape and I wrap it around just some business card, some throwaway business card, so that obviously this takes up a lot less space than if you're having a roll of it in there. So, I mean, you're not going to need 50 feet of Gorilla Tape. So, this is maybe 10 feet of Gorilla Tape right here. And then what I do is I wrap it inside aluminum foil. Number one, aluminum foil can be used for a lot of things, so it's useful in and of itself just to have. But then number two, it keeps the Gorilla Tape from, like if you do leave these things in your car, it keeps the Gorilla Tape from melting all over and just mucking everything up. So, it takes very little room, and there's a lot you can do with this aluminum foil, and there's a whole lot you can do with the Gorilla Tape. So it's a good thing to have. I would definitely have some gloves. Now, these gloves I think cost like $11. They're leather. I mean, they nothing special. They work great. So maybe you've got some gloves around your house, or maybe you go to Home Depot and get a couple things or whatever. But I would definitely have some gloves because depending, like if it's weather related, you may have to move tree limbs out of the way, or you may need to work on your car. You may need to deal with hot things or sharp things or whatever. And the last thing you want to do is compromise your hands. So that, and then I would also recommend having a shamag, right? So these are very big. I talked about it a little bit in the last video, and I'll have a video in the future where I go through and actually show you a lot of different things that you can do with a shemagh and proper ways to wrap it around your head and so forth. So those are some basic tools that you would want. Again, at the very least, get some Gorilla Tape, have some gloves, some cutting tool, right? And you may already have it around your house. So that's at the very least. I personally carry a lot more than that, but that's just me. So, what you need and what I need, again, what I'm trying to do in this video is give you some ideas, but then also as far as the basics, what should you have? Now, as far as lighting goes, um, I would, a headlamp would be the number one thing that I would go with, because you can use this as a regular light, but you can also use it for hands free if you're trying to do stuff. So a headlamp, definitely. You can also, I personally, I really love this flashlight. This flashlight is super bright. It's got like red and blue flashing things. It's got a metal, magnet, so it'll. So this board's not super strong metal, but so it's got a magnet, so it'll stick on things. So like, for example, I could put this in my car, and it's got a red and blue flashing thing to help signal people. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do. I love this flashlight. Now this Luminade, this gives you a lot of really cool options, because what it does is you can expand it. Okay, there's a little thing right here, you just blow into it, and then it gives you ambient light. And so the solar panel, actually, what I've found is that you leave it out in the sun all day, and it'll get it about 70-80% charged, which is more than enough for all night. So I mean, if you had a power blackout for a week, I mean, leave this outside during the day, and then at night it'll light up a whole room, right? So it's super, super useful. You can also plug in, use it to charge batteries and like phones and stuff like that. So it's a power bank as well. It's like $50, so it's not the first thing I would throw into your bag, but if you're looking for a really useful thing, I love this, right? So again, you can get this for like $10. Get that, throw it in your bag, make sure it's charged and everything else. So the next thing is navigation. Yes, you can get a compass if you want. They have expensive ones. This one, I think it was pretty cheap, like $15 or something. You need to know how to use it. If you are going to get these, then like Sunto MC2s, I think are the really, really nice ones, but they're like $50-$80, something like that. So if you don't know how to use a compass, definitely don't deal with that. But this is also useful for a lot of other things too, right? So it's got like a mirror. You can signal people. You can also perform first aid type of things. So it does stuff, it's got a magnifying glass. So it's got stuff besides just a compass in it. And I mean, it's good for people to know how to use a compass. But I'm just saying that's not, like navigation is useful skill you should have, but it's not where I would start. But having a map of the area is a good thing. Having a notepad, I like these write in the reins. So having a notepad and just a plain pencil is useful for taking notes. What's really useful is to have on the first page or two, have people's phone numbers written down, because I mean, nobody remembers phone numbers, right? It's just in your phone. You just look it up. But if your phone didn't work and you were at like a payphone or something, you had to use somebody else's phone or something, whatever the case may be, would you know all these people's numbers? Would you know their addresses, right? And so it's useful to have those items in there. Another thing that people don't realize is, everybody's like, well, I use my phone, so that'll work. All right, well, what you can do for your phone is all these mapping programs, Google Maps, for example, you can download offline maps of whatever area, maybe where you live, or where your parents live, or whatever the case may be. Download these maps so they're offline, they're on your phone, so that way if cell service went out completely, you've got no coverage whatsoever, you still have that map on your phone and you can still get around. And that's a free option, takes no time to do it, and then it's just there. So next thing is food. Food is another one. It really depends, right? So sometimes people will just put in like some a bag of nuts or some energy bars. Sometimes like these are really popular SOS bars. And one of the things that's good about these is that they've got a shelf life of like 5 years, right? So this is like 3,600 calories right here, and again, it has a shelf life of like 5 years. Because if you put something in your bag, you don't want it to like go nasty and expire and everything else. So this is really good for that. Um, Survival tabs. These are not really so much food. These are more of like nutrients and so forth for you. They're pretty useful, and the shelf life on them is, I don't know, it's like 15 or 20 years. It's really crazy. Um, and the same with you can have, a lot of people will talk about like Mountain House or whatever kind of dehydrated foods. The problem is these are, I'd rather eat these than either of those, right? It's a nice warm meal, blah, blah, blah. But now you got to add water. You've got to add hot water. So you probably need some way of cooking something. Now you probably, you're going to dig into this bag. So now you've got to introduce, utensils, right? So, I do keep some of those in my bag just because, like I said, my bag is more. I look at it as much more than just an emergency bag. I look at it as like camping or like all these different other things as well. So, like for example, I do keep this cook pot in there. Um, but if you're just strictly building an emergency bag, maybe throw in some beef jerky, maybe some of these SOS ration bars. Maybe you just get some energy bars, right? So it doesn't have to be complicated. Don't overthink it, but just keep in mind who's it going to be for and for roughly how long. Don't throw cans of soup and stuff in there, right? They're heavy and they're not practical. So keep in mind what you're going to add in there. Number 9 is power generation. So to me, you would really want something like this that will charge solar, during the day. I find if you lay this outside, in direct sun, it'll get, I don't know, maybe half to 3/4 of the way charged after a day, something like that, which gives you plenty of power, right, to power all of your devices. I mean, if it's in a blackout, if you have no power for a week, you shouldn't be on your phone all the time anyway. You should be using it, sparingly. Now you can keep all these cables with you, right? So like, oh, you need an Android cable and an iPhone cable and this and that. So you can keep all these cables with you. Here's another option. This is just one thing to keep with you. And then it gives you, I can plug it into iPhone. I can plug it into Androids. I can plug it into all these different devices. This is not the cheapest option. It's like, I don't know, 15, 20 bucks, but it's, full cabling solution just in one. And here's another option as well. It's a very similar thing where it's a full cabling option, right? So basically it's a cable and then with a lot of adapters. So there's a lot of different options for those. Now cash. Um, a lot of people, they want to have these big bills, right? They might not have the $1 million bills like this, but you should absolutely have some cash in your bag. I always have cash in my bag. I always have cash in my travel bag. I always have cash on my, every day, like in my wallet, because you never know. Sometimes you need cash for something, and don't carry a $20 bill and think that you're good, because number one, if it's like some 3-day issue, $20 is probably not enough. And number two, let's say you want a Coke at a machine, right? And it's like $1. Use the $1 bill. Well, $20 is not helpful. So you want to use smaller bills. Now, if you're carrying like $200 or $300 with you, then yeah, maybe some 20s. But and as far as how much you carry, that just really depends on you. I would say no less than 50. Personally, I think 1 to 200 is a good amount. If you have too much, then it becomes kind of dangerous. Like I don't want somebody to steal $1,000 out of my bag, right? So $50 to $200 somewhere in that range is a pretty good thing to shoot for. Now, number 11, comfort, hygiene. That really depends on you, right? So I would at least get some wipes. Um, Here in Florida, I would at least have some, chapstick's a generic term. I always use Burt's Bees. Maybe some hand sanitizer, maybe toothpaste, toothbrush, whatever for the family. Another thing I think is really useful is playing cards. Like it's amazing if you got a couple of you or family or whatever, you're sitting around and you've got a bunch of time on your hands. Well, playing cards are really nice. Now, I like these. These are called survival cards. I think they're way overpriced. I think it was like 15, $20, but they're plastic cards. So if they get wet, they're no big deal. They don't bend very, very hard or very easily. And they've got all these different tips on each card, right? So, how to build different fires, how to create different knots, things about core body temperature. So it gives, one, it's a easy way for people to learn things, but two, it becomes a nice way for people to, just have conversations. Oh, did you know this? Oh, blah blah blah, right? Quizzes, whatever. But a deck of cards, and maybe it's $1, from a dollar store, a $1 deck of cards. Um, Security. Now that could be a lot of different things, right? So maybe you want guns or whatever. I personally carry different non-lethal options. So I like to have some pepper spray, not only for people, but also, you're out and you have some wild dog that's running at you or something like this. I don't want to fight him with a big old knife. I just want him to go away, right? So let me blast him in the eyes. You blast the dog in the eyes with pepper spray, and they're not going to keep coming at you. And a personal emergency alarm. So this, basically, I'm not going to do it to save your ears, but basically, I just pull on this and it'll automatically this really loud sound. So that's pretty easy deterrent. Maybe something like this. Like this is a flashlight, but then also it could be, a stun gun as well, right? So, and sometimes just the sound of that will actually get people to back off. Next thing is communication. Now you can talk about different, two-way radios and whatnot, but at the very least, this costs like $15, $20. It's something like this, so that this is an emergency. You can turn into weather bands, you can turn into news or whatever. Know what's going on. This is true whether you're traveling somewhere or you're just staying around in your house with no power, right? So it's got all these different bands. In a pinch, you can use it to actually charge your different devices. The solar on it, it doesn't hurt, but it's going to take a while for solar. But it also has a flashlight on it, and if need be, you can power it up by using a crank, so hand crank. So this is not my first option, but this basically says that I'm going to have power for stuff. So it's a pretty useful item to have. Now, as far as information goes, you don't know everything, I don't know everything, and so it's good to have little guides. This, I actually have the full size of this on my bookshelf, but so the SAS Survival Guide, this is amazing, and it's sold. I don't know if it's like sold like 11 million copies, or it's just crazy, right? So this is something pretty useful to have. It's relatively small and light, costs like $10 or something. These cost about $10 as well. So this one is a tiny little survival guide, and then I also keep a tiny little first aid guide, right? In all my first aid kits. So these things are pretty amazing. You open them up, right? And so it's not like a book. You're not going to just read through it because it's a lot of information. But it talks about all these different items that are really helpful to know. And one thing I would say when you get these guides, don't get the guide and let me get a first aid guide and throw in a first aid kit. You don't want the first time to read this to be when you're in an emergency, okay? So, and then it comes with a little Fresnel lens as well, so you can start fire, magnifying glass, things like that. But read these beforehand so you have an idea of what to do in an emergency situation, right? And then the last thing that I would talk about is a backpack. Now, I have a lot of backpacks. I didn't bother, pulling one out to show you because it really depends on you. Hopefully, you've already got a backpack around the house, right? And so you can just use that as a starter. Now, there's $300, $500 and up backpacks that are out there, and some people like organization, clamshells, lots of pockets, no pockets. It's kind of a personal thing. What I will say is you want to keep it to, I would say, probably 40 liters. Size-wise at the most, because there's lots of different sayings about it. Ounces equals pounds, pounds equals pain. You put all this stuff in there and get this backpack weighing like 50, 60 pounds. It's just not realistic to carry that, right? So So you want to keep it light, as light as you can. Um, and so again, backpacks, that's kind of up to you. I think I put a link to one or two on that Amazon link, but just to give you ideas. But really, that's up to you. So if I were going to start from scratch building an emergency bag, hopefully I would have a backpack around the house I could use. I would get, I would have a liter bottle of water, get a Sawyer Mini in there. I would get this first aid kit from Johnson & Johnson. It's like 20 bucks. This will form the basis of your boo-boo kits and your first aid kits, but then also leave a whole bunch of Band-Aids and stuff for the house. I would add those key items, the tourniquet, the, the trauma shears, and the Israeli bandage, and know how to use them. That's a key thing, right? The best thing about building out a first aid kit is when you build it out, you're the one putting every item in there, and so you know what's useful, right? Some people, you may not think of a Sharpie being useful in a first aid kit. I can tell you that they are, right? But and again, we'll talk about that later. But so that's the way I would start on first aid. Now, as far as shelter, or well, as far as fire, throw a Bic lighter in there, right? I mean, ideally, you're gonna, make it so that the gas thing doesn't just soak up, just this lever gets pressed and it's gonna just spew all the gas. It's happened to me more than once, right? So now you can use zip ties around there, but then you got to cut it off. So something to keep that on there, maybe some Gorilla tape. At the very least, get one or two of these Mylar blankets to throw in there. Maybe, some clothes, change of clothes. Again, you can fill up a backpack pretty quickly with clothes. So, figure out what you need. Maybe they're not in the backpack. Maybe they're like off on the side of your car. There's a blanket or something like that, in the trunk. Maybe a beanie, some kind of rain gear. I would definitely have that. Something to cut with, right? It doesn't have to be a fancy, knife or Leatherman or anything else, but something to cut with. Ideally, some cord. Ideally, some Gorilla tape. Some gloves, super important. Some kind of lighting. This is like 10 bucks. And I didn't mention this, but for food, don't forget food and water. Don't forget your pets, right? So have some little collapsible bowls so that your pets can, eat and drink and so forth out of it as well. For navigation, having a thing to write with, notepad and pencil is helpful. Download local maps onto your phone. That's at the very least. I would also get paper maps. Later, maybe you can get a compass. Food, for right now, I would keep it simple. Just get some beef jerky or get some, whatever is good for you to put in your bag, and then you can expand upon that later. Keep in mind, you always want to go through your bag every 3 months, 6 months, whatever. Number one, to get a feel for what's there and remember what's there and so forth. Number two, to charge your different items. Number three, to check and make sure your medications and your food have not expired, right? So you want to go through and check all these things. I go through periodically, and in fact, that's what I'm going to be doing today, is making sure every one of these items are getting fully charged. So for food, keep it simple. For power banks, maybe you already have one laying around in your house. Don't worry about that. I mean, just throw that in there with some cables. I like the solar one. It's a really good option. But, cash, you want to have cash. Toiletries, don't go crazy there. I mean, worst case, you could go 3 days without brushing your teeth. Or maybe you say, you know what, I definitely want to brush my teeth. Key things I would have for me personally: some kind of wipes, a deck of cards, some kind of sanitizer, and then like some kind of lip balm. Those are, and maybe like a Gold Bond, right, powder for your feet, for your other regions. There's all kinds of things that it's useful for. So that, at the very least, I would throw in a thing of pepper spray into your, this is, I don't know, 10 bucks, something like that. Again, it's good for people, it's good for animals, so forth. If you lived in the hills where there's bears and whatnot, maybe you don't go pepper spray, maybe you go bear spray. I would definitely add this, right? So it's 20 bucks maybe, super useful. And then I would absolutely get these tiny guides, both of the tiny guides. So I hope you found all of this helpful. And like I said, we'll be going through more, especially with the skills and whatnot, in future videos. So if you would, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment on these things, because I want to know, what are some key things that you would include that I didn't, or what are some key things that I brought up that you would have never thought about, or you disagree, or you do agree, or or whatever the case may be. Let's have conversations, right? So like, subscribe, comment, hit that bell so you know when my next video drops. So until next time.
Bye.